Hey everybody, this is Josh Spilker. I do content and SEO for AirOps, and I'm excited to be joined today by my fantastic colleague, Oshen Davidson. How are you doing, Oshen?
Hey everybody, I am doing great, Josh.
Thanks. I'm excited for Oshen to be here because usually she is doesn't work in New York, but we're in the same office today, all the way in different rooms. So fun times.
Yeah, it's going great.
Oshen, tell us a little about your background and where you are from.
Yeah, hi everybody. I live in Portland. My background is in SEO, but here at AirOps, I lead our all of our research, and I'm also Josh's specialty content engineer. So I get to build for Josh a lot of the time, which is fun.
Yeah, that's been fun. So, what we're going to cover is what problem we're trying to solve, a good solution in AirOps, and then the results from that. And I'll let you know that this content engineering workflow sessions have been super valuable. Last week, if you were here, Connor from LegalZoom shared his workflows for Reddit, which was fantastic. Everybody go check that out. You can go to airops.com/blog and find that recap if you're interested in the Reddit workflows. But me and Ocean had a privilege. Where were we at yesterday, Ocean?
We were at MozCon.
Yes, we were at Moscow together, an SEO conference here in New York City, and Connor from LegalZoom was actually there. It was super fun. Without further delay, Ocean is going to walk us through a really great workflow that she built, looking at how brands are mentioned in LLMs. So we're going to start, I believe, in the grid. And Ocean, I'm going to go ahead and let you start sharing, okay? So I'm going to stop my
All
share
right,
and then give it over to you.
perfect. All right, everybody. So this is something that I built. It's very easy to replicate this. You can get a lot of insights from this, and it saves you a lot of time. You don't have to use ChatGPT or Perplexity externally. You can do it all in AirOps. So in here in the grid, so what you can do is you can take a query, and then the workflow that I built, what it does is it will ask ChatGPT. I'm using 4.1 with web search enabled for this one specifically, but it will query the LLM, and then it will extract the LLM's response as well as all of the brands that are mentioned in the response, and then the number of instances that they are mentioned. So let's say, for example, HubSpot is mentioned in the response and it's in there 4 or 5 times. It'll capture that, and then also all of the citations for the response, which is really great because one thing that this workflow will do is it'll take all of those citations and the corresponding mentions, and then it will then scrape those cited pages so that you can see how many times that brand that's mentioned in the response is present on that citation. And so I'll show everybody under the hood here.
Yeah, before you dive into that, so what we're trying to do
Yeah.
here is find third-party mentions within LLMs for a specific query. So I believe the query that you just had up was around like email segmentation. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So this one
Okay.
here, it's what are the best email segmentation tools with analytics tracking?
Okay. So now we're going to hit it, go into that workflow to see what, and then, yeah, walk us through how your logic is working here.
Yeah. Let's see here. So in here, so the first thing it's going to do is it's going to query the LLM. It's very simple. So literally all we have here is we just have the query in the system prompt. You can change the model to anyone that you want. There's no hard set rule in here, but what it will do is it'll then ask the LLM for that query. After it does that, we can see here in the example, like the output. So it'll show the body, all of the brands mentioned. So in this instance, HubSpot's mentioned, Active Campaign, Klaviyo, Brevo, Marketo, so on and so forth. And then you can also see alongside each of these brand mentions, for example, MailChimp here, you can see email service business is the corresponding citation for this mention. And so this is very similar to what you would see if you were going to chatgpt.com or you're using the ChatGPT application. A lot of the times you'll see the citations within the actual LLM response. And so it basically replicates it here in AirOps for you to be able to further analyze. And
Can
then,
you pull up one of the
yeah,
URLs there just to
yeah,
maybe show
let's see here.
how we would analyze this URL?
Yeah. So you're talking about this page here, like the actual page of the, yeah. So this one here, so this is maxmart.co. And so there's a few of the brands that are mentioned in the workflow. They're present in here. For example, we can see Shopify, and we can see up in here just by doing like a manual check to make sure it's accurate. We can see Shopify was mentioned 4 times in the article. And so one thing that this saves, the workflow itself, it'll just save you time from having to go and do this like manually on every page and be able to see, okay, is Shopify being linked? Is it just being talked about? So on and so forth. And one thing that's really great about this is that you can do this at scale. You can generate hundreds of queries that you want to do some research on. You can run them all through the grid, and then you can collect all the data. And then from there, you can export as a CSV, or you can continue to work out of the grid and further analyze the data and really see what you find.
Yeah, that's really great. So we're going to try to see using the workflows here, like how many times HubSpot appears like in this URL and then like mentions all across the LLMs. So you can either walk us through the grid or keep going through the workflow.
Yeah, I'll show everybody here. So in this instance, so what we do after we query it and ask the LLM for the response, we're extracting the mentioned brands. And so what it's doing is it's just looking for the brand names. And then we're going to use a code step, and we're going to use Python for this to then format the brands into an array. And so then we can see here, HubSpot. It also gives you, one thing I really like about this is that it will tell you the context of how HubSpot is mentioned. And so it'll give you like the supporting text. And then we see in here, this is the citation URL that's corresponding. And so it'll generate a bunch of these, however many citations there are. And then
Nice.
yeah, it's great. And one thing that's really awesome about this is that you can change what you want to extract very easily, because it's basically giving you bulk amount of data, and you can always you can use some of the outputs here for then future inputs into other workflows too, which is nice.
Yeah, can you take us over to the grid real fast and maybe
Yeah.
show how you have that set up?
Yeah. So in here, so one of the last, basically the last step that I have in the workflow is it will automatically write everything that it's found and everything is collected as individual rows within the grid. So then, for example, if I wanted to do additional research on this Max Smart Co, or let's see some of the other ones, Get Meldoso, I could go ahead and run multiple other workflows on these. And then what I have it do is the workflow itself. It'll write the query, the brand name that was mentioned, the LLM response, which is the same that I showed all of you in the builder. And then it will also tell you, the visibility type. So in this instance, I'm specifically looking for third parties. So that would essentially mean that the brand that is being mentioned in the response, the citation that corresponds to that mention, it is not owned. In this instance, Klaviyo is the one being mentioned, and Max Smart Co is the one that is talking about Klaviyo and their content and influencing the LLM in this instance.
Yeah, that's great. And so Oshen recently did a research report on third-party discovery like this, and I'll drop that in the chat. But I think she used some slightly different workflows for that report, but I think this is really valuable because now we can see, hey, how many times is your brand appearing in this LLM response? And then which URLs are influencing that LLM response. So in this case, it is Maxmart Co. is mentioning HubSpot. HubSpot's mentioned like 12 times, right? In that top article. Yeah.
Yep. And we also have, that's probably one of the leading cited pages in here. They're mentioning they're basically driving and having a very heavy influence on this query in GPT, because we can see there's Klaviyo, Shopify, ActiveCampaign. There's several of them in here for that.
And then you could sort by that Maxmart article too, if you wanted to see which brands they're mentioning. Yeah. And so if you were going to do another report around third party or brand mentions, what's some insights that you might, or questions that this kind of provokes for you?
Yeah. So one thing that I find very valuable in this workflow, this example here, is that being able to see whether or not the brands that are being mentioned, when you go to analyze the citations that are driving that, whether or not they are linked, or if it's just a plain mention. And I think that there's a lot of value in being able to further determine, are backlinks crucial to influencing your visibility in AI search, or are they just supplemental? And I think there's just there's a lot of noise in the market right now on what works, what doesn't work. And so the only way that anybody's going to know is to test and to learn. And I think there's a lot of good insights that you could use, and you could also take and then develop further research and ideas off of too.
Yeah, because as I'm looking at your grid here, I see there's total mentions in the cited page, which means like HubSpot, for instance, is mentioned in the cited page, but the LLM response is not giving any link to mentions. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then you can start to analyze patterns like that. And then what's really great about AirOps and having this grid is just like how many of these you can do this at scale.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I find really helpful is the right to grid step in AirOps is, I feel like it's very underutilized, and it's incredibly beneficial, especially because you can take a grid, you can take any sheet in a grid and you can export that as a CSV, which you can also use in like a developer environment so that you can run further code on it. You can do like machine learning applications on it. You could upload it into Google Sheets. There's just like a lot of things that you can do that make it super useful, especially at scale.
Yeah. And I know that this workflow and this grid is actually fairly new. If you were to continue, one of the questions I like to ask everybody is, what would you do differently, or how would you improve this? So maybe what would be some things that you would add on to this to really build this out into a system?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really fascinating for me right now, and something that I just studied a bit of in this last research report, is just testing across multiple LLMs. And so, what I would probably do if I wanted to build this larger and really branch it out is I would have it run across like several LLMs and be able to better compare. Are there patterns where we see, for example, Perplexity, all of the citations, they tend to include a backlink for these brands that are mentioned versus ChatGPT doesn't. Looking for like little discrepancies to see like what works best to really win an AI search, because all models are going to be different. So that's probably what I would do from there. And then I think that from that you could even go and do a second part and scrape, for example, Shopify's domain and see, do they have any content on this exact query that would be a good match to show up in AI search? Or is it something, that they're just like not covering? Because you do see a lot of times that it's more common to earn a third party mention versus being mentioned and your own domain is influencing that mention.
Yeah, we have a lot of reporting that Oshen has done around
Yeah.
third-party influence. I dropped that link in the chat there. We also have a brand new one that we could put in there too around community and engagement. If Maria, if you're on the call, or if anybody from AirOps would be willing to drop that URL in there, that would be really great. And we'll send that out as well. We have a couple questions maybe about Python steps and things like that, but I see you have one more tab there about research insights. Is there another workflow you might want to touch on before we start answering specific questions?
Yeah, I have another little research workflow. This one is like one of my favorites. I actually built something similar for Josh for webinars like we're doing right now. But what I do is I take a research report and then I'll take the URL and then I extract the key takeaways. And I like to use this because it helps me with writing email distribution, like email campaigns, sharing it with other team members across like the org. That way it's really broken down into easy to digest chunks. And so this will show everybody. So for example, what I do here is I have it give me a very like high level summary of what the research studied. I'll also do top 5 takeaways. So I'll do like basically the main claim, main insight, followed by the quantitative stat that kind of supports that. And then we can go a little bit deeper and it goes into each one of those takeaways and then what it means for AI search, AEO, why it's important, and then some like additional like supporting insights as well. So this is honestly probably one of my favorite workflows. I use it for a lot of things. I use it for research, I use it for articles, for Josh, lots of that.
Yeah. So once you have your research in place and then you're starting to write the report, these are like some of the takeaways that you can use to inform that report. Love
Exactly.
that. Oshen, keep sharing your screen here for a second, but I did want to mention that if anybody's interested in getting started with AirOps, or if you've never used AirOps before, you're like, how does all this work? You've heard about content engineering, you've heard about great benefits that clients like Webflow and Docebo and Chime are getting, and you want to try it out for yourself, send us an email at growth@airops.com, and in the subject line, just put webinar, or you can put like workflow webinar, something like that. I'm typing it out right now. And then we'll happily get you started. So that's growth@airops.com. Put workflow webinar in the subject line. Okay. We are going to dive into a few questions that came in here, Ocean. And if you do have any more questions, we got about 12 minutes left. These are our short sessions here, straight into the point. So Shirley had a question. Do you have to write the Python code yourself within the workflows? If you want to open the workflow back up for a minute.
Yeah, no, you do not. That is the best part. So let me just like refresh this here. So you can go into Copilot, and Copilot is so helpful, so helpful. You can go into Copilot, and what you can do is you can just, if you have an idea of what you want to do, and maybe you just don't know how to write a prompt for it, or you're like, I don't know what kind of code I need to write, just explain it to Copilot, and Copilot will help you. And one thing that is also like one of my favorite features of Copilot is I can just press this little button and say, please explain this workflow. So I'm building a lot of the time, and I'll do several versions of a workflow, and a lot of the times I'll forget like what version is what unless I add explicit notes. And this is also really helpful, especially if you are looking to like repurpose. But you can just see here, it's telling me everything that it's doing and all for every single step that's in the workflow. But it's great at writing code. Claude, it uses Claude. That's how Copilot is built out. And in my opinion, I think Claude is like one of the best LLMs in terms of writing code. So super helpful.
Yeah, and it has a really great feature too. If you want it to write the code for you or even edit a step, it'll have something like,
Yeah.
do you want me to apply this step? And then you just hit accept or you hit reject. So again, it's really like customizable to what you want. And then my favorite feature is the auto mode where it just keeps testing things like over and over until it gets right. I was joking with some folks yesterday at ModScon that I'm like an English major, and I know Ocean has like a liberal arts background a little bit too, where I don't know how to code, but I can get a lot of help out of this. And it's always been a big help for me too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Copilot is amazing. If any of you are building and you're not using Copilot, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Fahad had a question here. I like this one. For this workflow, is query the only input, or are you using the brand name as an input as well?
I'm
And
only
I guess
using query. Yep. Yeah.
but you
I'm not
could do
giving
it where
any of their
you,
instructions. What was
there
that?
could be a setup. There could be a setup in a different workflow where you are looking for the brand name.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for this one, I'm explicitly putting in the query, and I'm not messing with anything else in the settings. So we can see in here, the only thing I have is I have a web search and to include citations, and then I'm just leaving it like how it is. The one thing that you can run into is if you add answer this question, then it's a little bit different than how you would expect to have a conversation with if you were in like ChatGPT on the browser or any other LLM. And so I like to just keep it like very like basic to the point. But of course, you could absolutely change this in any way that you want.
Could you flip back over to the grid just to show people where that
Yeah.
question input is? So this
Yeah.
is informing your query, and this is your input field.
Yep. Query is my input, and this is the only input that I'm putting into this workflow.
Yeah, perfect. We also had another question here. Are there pre-built use case workflows that we could grab and update? We do have a template library, so you could start with those and then customize them yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody wants a copy of this, I'm happy to share it out. It's super easy to use, easy to tweak, but we do have like our template library with pre-existing workflows as well as all of our power agents too.
Can you flash that up real fast would you go to the plus, is that right? Where the templates are? Yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
And so here's our template library that you could start and explore with. There's lots of use cases in here beyond what we're showing. Refresh meta tags, add internal links, refresh articles. Those are some of my favorite ones to start with if you're just getting used to AirOps. I think we had a couple other questions here too. Maybe this is related to the takeaways, but have you ever used AirOps to create LinkedIn posts?
I have, but to be honest, I haven't built a workflow, but I have used an AirOps workflow for LinkedIn. I tend to, just my own like personal choice, I tend to try to just write it myself. I'm critical about how I am on like LinkedIn and stuff, but I do know people that use AirOps workflows for LinkedIn, and it works well for them. I think really at the end of the day, you could definitely use it. It really comes down to like your style and how you're prompting, as well as what examples you're giving the LLM to be able to help you write. So it's really about like the guidelines and stuff in place.
Yeah, personally, I do have an AirOps workflow that I do use for some of my LinkedIn content, and it is based on a style. So am I like trying to make a listicle post, or do I want to do like a story? Do I want to do a real promotional type post that tries to get like a lots of engagement? Then you ground that with like examples that you want to put in there, and then you would have several workflows to be able to run that. And we can do a LinkedIn workshop sometime, but then it will have like different post options that I could then choose from and then edit myself. Yeah, oh, we had a good question here. You'd be well informed to answer this. What is a power agent?
Yeah, so a power agent. So it is essentially the way I describe it is it is a workflow and can also be a step. So you can add it, you can use it as a standalone, you can also use it within an existing workflow. And so I will show everybody here. Let's see here. Let's get out of Copilot. We can go, if you go into the power agents, you press this little add step button. And what it is, it's generally multiple steps. So it is like a little standalone workflow, but I could also integrate it into something that's existing. So for this instance, specifically this research workflow, there's not really like as applicable. But for example, if you wanted to just, let's say you wanted to just scrape a cited page, you scrape the cited page, and then you could translate the content. You could add this as a step in there, and then it would take the cited page, it could translate it for you, so on and so forth. There's a lot of really awesome use cases for these, but yeah, these are some of the ones that we have in here.
Yeah, that's perfect. John had a really great question as we're hitting the home stretch here. What are some of your other favorite use cases for a research or bulk scraping workflow?
Yeah, I like to do I also like to make a lot of little and like smaller little workflows. So I'm a big fan of Airtable. And so what I like to do is we just got a new like Airtable integration and I've been using that lately. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll create like a button in Airtable and I'll press the button and it'll fetch some information. And then, for example, I'll scrape like the page titles or the slugs of some of the citations or like the cited pages and just gather data in bulk. A lot of what I like to do, I tend to do like smaller bits. That way I can have the time to make sure that like I'm validating the data and I'm not just like doing everything all in one. I also prefer when it comes to research as much as possible to always use code, which is great because Copilot is super helpful with that. But I tend to prefer to use code for anything I can because it's just LLMs can hallucinate. And if you have a high temperature setting or you don't set in specific enough guardrails within your prompt, then it's always one of those things that you want to make sure that you're like back checking and double checking for as well.
Yeah, glad that was helpful for you, John. Vivek had a question about best performing workflows. That's nebulous because it depends on what you're going to be using your workflows for. We have
Yeah.
lots of great case studies about how people have refreshed, how they're appearing in LLMs based off of using some AirOps workflows. But maybe a great tip here or question for you is just what's one of the favorite workflows that you have built before? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite, I think like the one I'm most proud of is probably your webinar workflow, to be honest. Like, I'm not even kidding.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like several workflows that they all orchestrate together and they all go into a beautiful synchronous system. I feel like they're really well put together. But yeah, I would say that's probably one. Some other ones, really my key takeaways. I really like the key takeaways. I find it to be like very accurate. I've done a lot of fine tuning with that. And so it's something that anytime I publish a new research report, like the first thing I do afterwards is I'll run the report through my takeaways workflow and then I share it out with like our CX team and our sales team and across the org. And so it's one of my go-tos for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you again for building the webinar workflow, but also sharing this. Lots of great tips there, but I also wanted to mention this is our latest research report that Oshen did. We just released this, like 2 days ago, I think?
Yep.
Yeah, something like that. It's on how Reddit, YouTube, and LinkedIn decides who wins an AI search. She had an analysis of over 5.5 million answers. Some key takeaways here is that UGC and community platforms driving 48% of all citations in AI search. Any other fascinating insights that you had from this one?
Yeah, one that really surprised me was YouTube. I didn't expect for YouTube to be as dominant. And I think another one that really stood out to me, especially since there's just been a lot of conversations on Reddit lately, is I was surprised at how high and how often Perplexity is citing Reddit. It was just something that like I didn't even think about, but it was really fun to dive in and see all the differences across models, because I think that a lot of times we hear, oh, everybody just go to Reddit, go to Reddit, but then it doesn't mean it's universal across LLMs. And people who do like to use like AI search engines and stuff like that, everybody has their own preference on what LLM they like. And so I just found it to be like really interesting. But yeah, if anybody wants to check out and get into the nitty gritty, feel free to check out the report.
Yeah, it's a fascinating report for sure. We already did Q&A. What I was going to say is if you want to get access, I just dropped this in there, but you can get workflows for AI search in your brand. You can get access to our AirOps Insight dashboard. And then you can also get strategies for content like Chime, Webflow, and Lightspeed. Check out our customer stories. If you want access to this, feel free to email us at growth@airops.com. Put webinar in the subject line and we'd be happy to take care of you. Otherwise, keep checking out all of our great reports that Oshen's putting together, all of our great webinar series. I think I'm going to have Lucy Hoyle from Carta on next time, maybe in a couple of weeks, where she's going to be going over some of her like policy research. So if you are interested in that, be sure and join us. Otherwise, this has been really fun. Thanks so much, Oshen, for doing
Of
this.
course.
We'll have to have you back on sometime soon. Maybe we'll go over that webinar workflow. That would be pretty interesting for folks, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it.
All right. We will see everyone later. Thanks so much for joining us and have a good afternoon.